everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Yes, we are on and feeling good. I know. Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. I am humbled by your recorded adulation. And Kim is here, which is extraordinary in itself.
Kim, how are you?
Sometimes she's got a lot of competing interests, got a lot of stuff to do. She's a mother. She's an activist. She's a lot of good things. It's really, really cool that she's made time for us. And Albert is here, who is also extraordinarily busy. He has another job, as you might imagine. This is sort of a side hustle, as the kids say. I mean, it's just a little thing that he does kind of in his spare time. And still, he manages to focus and bring an energy that's extraordinary. It's something that I'm quite grateful for.
How does the internet work?
Well, it's Albert, it's Kim, it's myself, it's Tony. It's a community of people who have come here. Many of them started with us at a station called KGO Radio. It was a powerful talk radio station, and now we are here, even more powerful as they try to strike us down. We are more powerful than ever before. Yes, we will triumph, my friends. Let's do this thing.
You're looking particularly credible today, according to Trevor Starr.
I feel credible today. I really do. I am wearing my credibility glasses. For those of you who are just listening on audio, this is a show that's live on YouTube for 2 hours, and then it's put out on audio platforms across America and the world. It's the Spotify's of the world. It's the iHeartRadios of the world. And it's the Apple Podcasts of the world, or Google Podcasts, wherever you get it. So we're really grateful however you take in the content. We've got some good stuff for you today. Yes, we'll talk about, look, with the election less than 2 weeks away, we have to speak about where the state of the election sort of leaves us and the different constituencies and where they're supporting or where they're not supporting the lead candidates. And I say this in view of the fact that we're seeing pitches to specific constituencies. I mean, I'll give you a couple of examples. Black men, all right, suburban women, Arab Americans. All of these various constituencies, when put together, of course, can really lead to tremendous political support and a presumed victory for either candidate. So trying to shore up those constituencies and, in essence, get this broad scope of America focused in one place is the job of both campaigns. That said, if you can motivate those that already are really into you, if you're Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, the idea is that maybe that group, the people who already like you, people who show up at your rallies and people who have your bumper stickers and your flags and buy your crap, in the case of Trump, you know, the sneakers and the
Chinese Bibles?
Yes, the Chinese Bibles. If you can get them to actually vote, that might be sufficient. Generally speaking, and certainly looking at the polling, you'll need more than just your base to show up. So you'll need the ones that are leaning. You'll need them to show up. And, of course, the undecideds, you'll need them to show up. So the breakdowns, and we do them, and we'll do them with brother John Rothmann, who joins us bottom of the hour. The breakdowns of voters and where they'll go is the business of polling. And, of course, we've given you a lot of polls through the months leading up to this moment. And I'm sure that we'll have a couple of thoughts from Brother Rothmann, bottom of the hour. Our nephew in Michigan lets us know that the Arab community in Michigan, this is from Ren, is planning to vote for the Green Party in order to sink Michigan for Harris. Well, this is something I wanted to talk to John Rothmann about, but just because this first comment came in, I'll remark on it, and then we'll put a pin in it, and we'll come back around with John Rothmann on it, because what I think...
The Mark Thompson Show.
Yeah, we're kind of underway then. So our nephew in Michigan let us know that the Arab community in Michigan is planning to vote for the Green Party in order to sink Michigan for Harris. This is from Ren. It's a comment that leads us off, and I will just say this. The Arab community feels deserted by the Democrats. The Arab community, generally speaking, is against the funding of the Israeli military because they say the Israeli military is involved in Gaza and involved in various West Bank movements. And maybe, I mean, in other words, then you get into some of the specific stuff that the Israeli military is doing. You get into sort of military policy. But just from a geopolitical perspective, they view America's continued support of Israel as a problem. Okay. So that's why the Arab community is in Michigan, and there's a, particularly in Dearborn, Michigan, a real concentration of Arab Americans. They see the Democrats as, again, on the wrong side of this issue. And then, of course, that crew is not monolithic, meaning they have a number of different views about Israel, even within that crew. I mean, many would say, hey, Israel's fine. We're just saying we don't want all this money going to Israeli militarism, which we associate with humanitarian tragedy in Gaza, et cetera. And then there are others who say, we don't think Israel should exist at all. And, you know, that's a whole other extreme. All right. And I mean, and then I think there is some anti-Semitism, maybe a healthy amount of anti-Semitism wrapped up in it. So you've got the whole range. But it all boils down to we don't feel as though we can vote for Kamala Harris because she supports this policy, the policy of support for Israel. So they vote for the Green Party, and that is a protest vote, right? We know the Green Party's not going to win. Jill Stein's not going to win. Jill Stein is, even her own family doesn't want her running. She is viewed by her own family a little the way RFK Jr. is viewed by his family, okay? As having really lost her way. But she is running. It's ego. It's, I'd say, special interests. Many have suggested a connection to Russia. You can have that conversation too. I don't want to really have a lot of conversations about Jill Stein because I don't think who she is that important, because she is not relevant to actually winning or a victory. Her relevance comes in being a spoiler, and she is a spoiler, and she is extremely relevant as a spoiler. So back to our Arab American community. They vote for Jill Stein, or they don't vote, either one. Mm-hmm. And they are correct in saying, and we'll give Michigan to Trump. So, but here's the other shoe that drops. Trump makes Kamala Harris's policy toward Israel look like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Trump has a much more militant view of the Middle East, informed largely by those who he surrounds himself with who are on the religious right. They have a biblical futurist plan that has to do with the end of the world and Jesus returning and all this stuff that, again, Trump doesn't believe in that stuff, but he's happy to turn over the keys to the foreign policy car over to those who are driving in that direction. So what I would say to the Arab community is you're making a huge error, because at least Kamala Harris and her administration, were she to become president, will have a meeting with you and modify policy. It's already happening under the Biden administration. There is a pressure already happening today from Blinken on Netanyahu, demanding that more be done in Gaza in a humanitarian way, done by Israel, okay? In other words, there are already contingencies that are being talked about, making support for Israel contingent on some of these things. Trump will have none of those meetings. So I would say to you, Arab community in Michigan, you are voting against your own interests. So in your desire to send a message, you're voting against your own interests if you really care about what's going on in the Middle East. And I think you do. So I don't understand why you would ever vote for Jill Stein.
Rain writes, the problem is Netanyahu. Biden has no control over what he does. Secretary Blinken has made numerous trips to the Middle East. But I don't think Trump has any control over Netanyahu either. As a matter of fact, aren't Trump and Netanyahu kind of buddies?
Trump and Netanyahu do have a good relationship, or a transactional relationship or whatever it is, a photo op relationship. It's certainly not an adversarial relationship. Again, Rothmann is really something of an expert on the region, so we'll talk to him bottom of the hour. But all I would say is, once you get into the specifics of it's all about Netanyahu and Netanyahu won't pay any attention to us, believe me, it may seem as though Israel's not paying any attention, or Netanyahu, more to the point. The Israelis are not happy with Netanyahu either. I mean, this idea that Israel, it's like when talking about the Americans in the war in Iraq. Well, America wants to stay in, well, not all of America wants to do anything. Come to America and talk to us. Go to Israel and talk to them. There's a plurality of opinion on this as well. But all I would say in closing is, sure, the politics of Israel depend on Netanyahu, and Netanyahu is pursuing, and he's a really awful leader. And he's there in power with this coalition of intense religious support, which is all bad. But I would say now you get into the minutia, and just because you think that he's ignoring Blinken doesn't mean he is. I promise. The contingencies that America has for its support, military support, and other support for Israel, those are real contingencies, and they can build around humanitarian efforts and even changes in policy when it comes to Netanyahu and Israel. So we'll talk more about it with John Rothmann. But if we do not keep our democracy, you won't see anything done for anything else. I agree with that. Yeah, DW, very good. Yeah.
And I understand having a being so passionate about a particular policy, because I feel that way about women's reproductive rights. But regardless of what you feel about that or what you feel about the Israeli policy, if we don't have a constitution and an America to come back to, we're not getting anything else.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the perfect is the enemy of the good. And we all really could learn that. I'm very much in the world of animal activism. And this is a lesson I learned early. You got to take little victories, and you got to stave off huge defeats. And so if you want a better life for these doomed creatures, in the case of animal activism, you need to take the little steps, the cages that are a little bit bigger, the transport vehicles that have a little bit of regulation as to how long those creatures can stand in those trucks in the heat, without food, without water, just being led to slaughter. I learn that incremental improvement is something. It works. And so in a perfect world, I would abolish all of that. But I can't have that perfect world. And that's not the world in which we live in a number of different ways. Now, to cut back to women's reproductive freedoms, it's outrageous what's going on. So I'm not settling for incremental stuff. I'm looking for, and we had it already. Women had real reproductive freedom in this country. And now you've seen what's happened. And to Kim's point, that same crew is getting back in. And this time, they're going to be surrounded by those who have a strong agenda and a legislative punch list. And Donald Trump will be surrounded by loyalists and judges that will be placed like Eileen Cannon, who is being considered for the attorney generalship of this country. She is, from everything I've read, she's not even qualified to be like a traffic court judge. She may be Attorney General of the United States. So one has to look at the specter of that happening when you cast your vote. And so you can be a single issue voter. Maybe it's Israel that's your single issue. All right, but legitimately examine the options. Because the Jill Stein option or the I'm going to leave it blank option hands Michigan, in this case, to Donald Trump. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
yeah, I've got a lot to do. Can I just mention, and I'll talk more about it with John Rothmann, because Rothmann is, as I say, he's well-educated in the region. I do have a chunk of Trump coming up. I also have, we've got a special conversation today at the end of the show with a guy who is reporting public radio guy who's reporting in a series of podcasts about what's going on college campuses. There's a renewed activism on college campuses. It almost feels as though it's a late 60s, early 70s kind of thing when the college campuses were alive with anti-Vietnam war sentiment. Now it's about a number of other things, and we've seen it blow up around Gaza, and we've seen it also blow up around free speech. So we'll talk to him today. Kirk Carapezza, the College Uncovered podcast is what it's called, and we'll talk to him at the bottom of the hour. So, I'm sorry, at the bottom of the second hour. So, we're a 2-hour show. Exactly. If I can...
The Mark Thompson Show.
If I can make it to the end of the second hour. I'll put aside, I did have, Albert, as you know, I had some emails that I wanted to get to, but I'm looking, and I don't think I can do it quickly.
I've received a lot of positive letters.
Yeah, I am looking, but I feel as though it's going to be a little tough for me to get to it quickly. So, Delette, who is a regular listener, viewer, and a big supporter from the very beginning, how about you? It's my 74th birthday, she says. She gives us $74 for the show.
I'm not gonna cry! I'm not gonna cry!
Well, it's cryable. It's definitely cryable. Yay, it's my 74th birthday. Yay, keep up the good work. Go, Kamala. I love this program. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Delette, we love you too. You're a great supporter of this show.
Big shout out.
Big shout out to you. Happy birthday, my dear. Wow. 74. I just hope I make it that far. That's terrific. Really. I love it. I really do love it.
Thank you for your generosity on your birthday when you should be getting the gift. But thank you so much for helping crowdfund this show.
Yeah. I really, I don't know what I would do if I had to I guess I'd take her for a nice lunch, a toast to her 74 years, to the hopes that Trump is defeated. I'm not a Trump fan. I think he is every bit of the horror show that's advertised. And maybe we go to McDonald's for
fries?
Not McDonald's.
What?
Yeah,
No.
for a little E. coli with our champagne. Yeah, there you go.
Fun. Nice.
Sure. Look, there's nothing that goes with E. coli like a dry, bubbly offering. Happy birthday, Delette, says the world. As you watch that, I'll just mention to you, the E. coli outbreak is linked to McDonald's Quarter Pounders. I mean, is there nothing sacred? One is dead. 49 are sickened. And the CDC, which, as again we've mentioned before, would be dismantled under a Donald Trump presidency. So grab these CDC advisories while you can, because once Lord Master Trump gets in, there won't even be any doctors in the house.
No.
Multiple agencies, along with the CDC, are investigating an E. coli outbreak linked to quarter-pound burgers at McDonald's. It almost seems un-American. 49 people sickened across 10 states, 10 people requiring hospitalization. There's been one death. Most of the illnesses have been reported in Colorado and Nebraska, though illnesses have been reported as far west as Oregon and as far east as Wisconsin. The contaminated ingredient has yet to be identified. McDonald's is saying an initial investigation found that these illnesses were tied to the slivered onions from a supplier that serves 3 of the fast food giant's distribution centers across America. McDonald's is saying that it is stopping the use of quarter-pounder patties and the slivered onions in several states. Their official statement: we are working in close partnership with our suppliers to replenish the supply of quarter pounders in the coming weeks. In the meantime, all other menu items, including other beef products, cheeseburger, hamburger, Big Mac, McDouble, and the double cheeseburger, are unaffected and available. Wow. If you're in Colorado, Kansas, Yeah, but where has the quarter pounder been removed? I want to know.
Why are you yelling?
Colorado, Kansas, Utah, Wyoming. You cannot get a quarter pounder there.
Why are you yelling?
Also, removed in parts of Idaho and Iowa.
Gross.
That's
Heather,
not all, Kim.
Wait, let me just tell you.
Now, let me tell you. Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Mexico, Oklahoma. You can't get a quarter pounder there.
Why are you yelling?
Look what Trump has done.
The guy spends one day working McDonald's, and he's not even working. It's a setup. They'd closed that McDonald's. Those people were all setups. It was a photo op. He just spends one day on the premises of McDonald's, and now I can't get a Big Mac anywhere in America.
Why are you yelling?
Heather says Trump brought his BS into a food prep area, and now look what happened.
If he'd only washed his hands, I don't know if I want to detail this, but I'm going to. What do you want to call it? Symptoms of E. coli, infection, diarrhea,
Ew.
a fever higher than 102,
No thanks.
diarrhea for more than 3 days, bloody diarrhea.
Ew.
Wow, this is really so far it's a pretty bad party.
Good morning,
So much
everyone.
vomiting.
Have another sip of your Coachella Valley coffee. Good morning.
Thompson, party of four.
That's okay. We're not hungry anymore. We're just going to pass. Bloody diarrhea. So much vomiting that you cannot keep liquids down. Signs of dehydration, like not peeing much, dry mouth and throat, feeling dizzy when standing up. These are all things that you will perhaps encounter should you get a bad quarter pounder.
Cameo says this weight loss program is brought to you by Trump.
Oh, my God.
Don't talk to me that way.
It's a really tough spot for everybody who...
It was very inappropriate.
The McDonald's people are not happy about it either, everyone.
God.
Meantime, we are in the final 2 weeks.
Phineas says, don't let Trump near Coachella coffee.
Oh,
No.
my God. Can you imagine, please? Let me just quickly have a... Where's my...
$5 from Peter.
It's Coachella Valley coffee. More about that later. Peter Newton says the Lord was watching Trump and he is not happy.
This is a word from the Lord and he's not happy.
Well, we're on to that now, so let me just mention this. Thank you, Peter. And then I'll get to John Rothmann in a moment. But
The Mark Thompson Show.
The No Contendo says every burger Trump touches to turns to S. Well, we've got to... He wasn't even working the burger. Well, he wasn't really working any counter, so, but you know. A commentator says, I knew it would happen. Trump ruined McDonald's for all of us. Well, it's true. All of a sudden, the Golden Arches have a kind of different vibe. Wow. Donald Trump suggesting he was literally anointed by God. The former president told a group of Christian voters that he was chosen by a, quote, supernatural hand and suggested that his life was, quote, saved by divine intervention.
Who is having that conversation?
Well, it's just the former president is having that conversation. Trying to shore up conservative Christian voters in North Carolina, Trump cast himself as something of a religious warrior, it's suggested here, anointed by the supernatural hand of God to win a second term in office. Quote, I would like to think that God saved me for a purpose. This is in, as I say, North Carolina. It was a gathering of conservative pastors in North Carolina. He said that his faith had deepened since the attempt on his life at a Pennsylvania rally and wants to make our country greater than ever before. It's so odd because those remarks, which came a day after his vulgar rally rant about Arnold Palmer's anatomy and, you know, evil political opponents, the threat from within, all of that stuff. He's trying to boost turnout from this block of conservative religious voters. That's what I was talking about. You know, they're all of these constituencies, and you have to try to get them all together. Social conservatives did help him win the presidency 8 years ago, as you know, and he vowed to appoint Supreme Court justices that would roll back Roe and really bring religion back into the political discourse and to political agendas that would be followed by legislation. And that's what he is doing again. And he paid off on that promise. He put Federalist Society, Leonard Leo picked Supreme Court justices and other justices within the judiciary to push the Christian agenda. That is, they're unapologetic about it. Ron Jackson says, yes, an all-knowing God would pick a cheat, liar, and thief to lead his people. I think that appointment may have come from somewhere deeper and hotter. I get it. I get it. So, once again, he has, in front of a conservative community, cast himself as the savior, essentially, for that community and their agenda. And honestly, if you embrace that agenda, I would imagine that you're happy with Donald Trump and that you want to see him ascend to power, and you're ready to look past all of these indiscretions, transgressions, felonious acts, other illegalities, the raw talk about Arnold Palmer, he's an adjudicated rapist, and you're in a situation where you have to look past all of that, but to support him. That said, religious communities, we make a big deal about, there's sort of this perceived purity about religious communities. I'd suggest to you just the opposite. I'd suggest to you in general, with all respect to those who are deeply religious and you're part of some organized religion, that there's tribalism that kicks in. And it's not unlike the tribalism that we see in politics in America, which is, if it's my guy, I'm ready to look past everything because I know that the other side is demonic or the other side is bad. The other side is so bad and so dark in their vision that I must look past all these acts on the part of, in this case, Donald Trump. So you can go to a conservative pastor and say, well, how about his womanizing? How about when his wife is pregnant and he's rolling around with a porn star? How about the adjudicated rape? How about these, thou shalt not steal? That's all he does. He steals from people. He short pays vendors. He doesn't pay a lot of people on his staff. He is this boorish, aggressively awful person. Well, the Lord picks an imperfect vessel for the Lord's perfect work. That's what you hear. That's a deliberate looking past what failings there might be.
Are you sure it wasn't just part of trying to sell more Bibles? Did he not just say, I am the anointed one, by the way, $24.99, here's the Bible, you'll too go to heaven if you buy my product? No?
It is an odd look. Kim is not wrong. It's an odd look. You know who's out there, though, for Kamala Harris? Barack Obama.
Oh, my God. Did you see him last night? He was on fire in Michigan.
Albert has a little bit of it, and he will share it with you now. Albert, can you get the former prez? This is Barack Obama speaking on the stump in Michigan. Go for it.
Virus, and I talked to scientists, and they said, look, with globalization, with travel, growing populations, at some point we're going to have a big pandemic. So I said to my team, I said, look, the same way we plan for hurricanes and tornadoes, we actually have to plan for a pandemic. So we put together a whole playbook, talked to the experts. We got all the agencies together. We said, if a pandemic happens, here's how we are going to deal with the public health system. Here's how we're going to deal with the schools. Here's how we're going to accelerate vaccinations. And here's how we're going to explain it to people so people can understand it. We've practiced it. So when Donald Trump comes in, just like I handed him a good economy, I handed him this playbook. And he just, I guess, dropped it in the trash bin. 3 years later, a pandemic hits. Now, I want to be really fair and accurate on this, all right? No matter who was president, COVID was going to be a crisis. No matter who was president, people were going to die and get sick, and there were going to be businesses that shut down for a while and travel restrictions, because this is something that hadn't happened for 100 years. But if you look at right across the border in Canada, their per capita death rate from COVID was 60% lower than here in the US. Now I want you to do the math. Over 1 million people died during the pandemic here in the US. 60% is 600,000 people. That's people's grandparents, people's parents, co-workers, friends. Some of those folks might be alive if we have a competent president who actually is paying attention and doing their homework and actually trying to make things better, as opposed to telling people, go ahead and inject bleach. That might work. So do not tell me that your vote doesn't matter.
That's great stuff, Albert.
If somebody,
and I'll continue. Just pause there for a second. I would just want to make a comment, because what I like about that is, A, that he's passionate. I mean, this is in no particular order. I mean, if I really had to say A, I'll tell you what and in a particular order, I'll tell you what I really like. I like that Obama speaks on policy and on specific facts that we all lived through. We all lived through COVID, and we know what a chaotic mess it was. And we lose track because there's just so much out there, and there's so much noise, and there is so much to focus on, to be fair. We lose track of how there was in place at the federal level a strategy for dealing with a pandemic. There's this notion somehow that, oh my God, what could possibly have been done? And certainly, and as I thought Obama spoke frankly and honestly about, anyone and any administration would have been overwhelmed on some level. The demands of a pandemic are overwhelming. But the idea that just because Democrats and Obama had left behind a strategy for dealing with the pandemic, I mean, this is a complicated, multifaceted crisis, and you actually have a playbook from which you can draw and at least use it as a springboard for those things that you want to do. He S-canned all of it. Trump got rid of all of it.
How frustrating it must have been for President Obama and for all of the people on his team to know they saw it coming. And 3 years ahead of time, they actually had a plan in place. We would have been so prepared that they did all the work. They did all the prep. They got us ready, that we were in the best position ever. And it was all trashed.
And in fairness, it was in effect a bipartisan plan, because George Bush had also begun all of what Kim is talking about, begun building that playbook too. In other words, administration to administration.
Sure.
This was an anticipated crisis, and yet the chaotic insanity that followed COVID in this country was all because of Trump, a clueless man who is out there feeling as though he could PR his way out of it. Yeah. It's all going to go away with the warm weather. He had his surrogates, Larry Kudlow, who was his finance guy, his economics guy. He said the same thing. So that became the refrain. It's going to go away. No big deal. You know, believe me, the summer, it's going to get. It was, and then of course you have the cartoonish thing, the bleach and everything else that, you know, and Trump was having his daily briefings, and he was talking about how many people were watching the briefings. He was so excited by the number of people. Hey, dude, it's an international crisis. That's the reason a lot of people are watching your briefings, because you're president. And we keep looking for some credible source on this, and it was Trump's fecklessness that led to the rise of Anthony Fauci. Anthony Fauci never would have achieved the kind of visibility and popularity that he achieved, were it not for the fact that he seemed like the only reasonable guy in the room. We knew we were being lied to. Give me somebody who is at least an expert in this field. So let me hear the rest of the Obama stuff, and then I want to get to John Rothmann.
Make a difference. Then you've got to tell them, no, having somebody who's competent and sees you and cares about you and thinks about you, it makes a difference. It'll make a difference to them. They may not always know it. And if that's not enough, then you also have to remind them that any election is about more than just policies. It's about values, and it is about character. Now, some of you know, growing up, I didn't have a father in the house, but I was lucky enough to have people around me: a stepfather, my grandparents, teachers, coaches, and most of all, my mom, who tried to teach me the difference between right and wrong, and who showed me what it meant to be honest and be responsible and to work hard and be accountable and treat other people the way I'd want to be treated. And I won't lie to you. You know, when I was a teenager, through young adulthood, I did not always live up to those values the way I should have, and I made mistakes, and I tried to learn from them. And I internalized those values, and I tried to live up to them, and I tried to pass them on to my kids. And I suspect most of you grew up the same way. And one of the most disturbing things about this election, about Trump's rise in politics, is how so many of us, even good people that we know, seem somehow suddenly to be willing to set aside values that we were taught. I mean, the day after the 2020 election, thousands of mail ballots were being counted right here in this convention center. And because Donald Trump was willing to spread lies about voter fraud in Michigan, protesters came down, banged on the windows, shouting, "Let us in, stop the count." Poll workers inside being intimidated. Earlier this month, we learned that someone on Trump's campaign told the lawyer to, quote, to find a reason to try to throw out votes, quote, even if it's BS. Hey, do not boo. Later, hold on. Later, the same staffer said, quote, make people riot. All because Donald Trump couldn't accept losing.
I love that, again, for the specifics. I like the fact that he reached back to his own history. He spoke about character, but then he talked about character in relation to the election and in relation to what Trump and his henchmen tried to do. You realize how we are teetering on the edge of this kind of chaos, and how, to be fair to Obama, because I thought he just did such a beautiful job with that, character does translate directly into what happens on the streets of America and in this election. That's what's happening with that Rudy Giuliani thing. He thinks he can get away with saying whatever he wants, talk about the poll workers actually cheating, not counting votes, corrupting the process, and he's being held to account. But the idea that you could actively try to subvert the process just because you need to win, it's an extraordinary thing.
To put a pin in the Obama speech from last night, he goes on after that to talk about normalizing Trump's speech, the enemy within, vermin, all the things that, we heard from fascists and dictators, and those words coming back and being used in American politics, and how people don't believe Trump. They say, oh, he's just talking to talk. That, they don't believe that he's going to do what he says he's going to do. And Trump talked about Obama talked about the danger of normalizing that type of speech and that type of behavior, and how that is not normal.
I'd love to get back to Obama if there's time, maybe during the time with John Rothmann, Albert. So please, if you could hold on to it, and we'll get to it, I promise. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
Smash the like button like a boss, if you would. It's a way to help us in the YouTube algorithm. I don't really understand how it works either, but
smash it with your iron rod.
Smash it like a boss, damn it. Lay on
Smash
it.
it with your iron rod.
And speaking of bosses, how about this guy, our former colleague? He's a presidential historian, great political mind. He joins us on Wednesdays. How about it for John Rothmann? John, you heard the comments and the speech that Obama was delivering on the stump in Michigan. I wonder if you could speak to sort of these surrogates, first of all. Harris has and Trump has these very strong surrogates. I'd say among the strongest would be Barack Obama.
People don't vote for surrogates. Surrogates can make a statement, endorsements, all that sort of thing. But in the end, when people walk into the voting booth, I don't think surrogates matter.
And so, John, if that's true, it reminds me of something else, which is people vote with their gut. You know, people, that's what George Bush, the younger George Bush, sort of slid into power on was, he's the kind of guy I would have at a barbecue. I could have a beer with this George Bush guy. Gore just seems too stiff to me, or whatever. These sort of the je ne sais quoi of the whole thing. How much does that, I feel like that factors in a lot, and there's not a whole lot you can do about that.
No, you can't. And remember, Gore won the popular vote by 500,000 votes, but we don't elect a president by the electoral vote. So why is Obama in Michigan? Because Michigan is central. If Trump carries Michigan, the odds of his winning the election go up. So the Democrats are concentrating. I had a note this morning, fundraising note, of course, from Elise Slotkin, who's the Democratic candidate for the U.S. Senate in Michigan, and they're desperate to make sure that Trump loses Michigan. Now, you asked earlier about the question of voting for Jill Stein. Let me just remind you, the man who wanted to ban Muslims from immigrating to America, the man who clearly is no friend of the Muslim world, is Donald Trump. I know that there is anger and distress over what's happening in Gaza, but why cut off your nose to spite your face? That me is the bottom line. And by the way, Trump would be doing exactly what Biden is doing. He would be resupplying the Israelis with the weapons they need to defend themselves. He's made that perfectly clear. So I think it's really a very interesting dynamic. By the way, now there's an appeal for Jews to turn out and vote in larger numbers. And I believe that Jews will, in the end, vote over 70% for Kamala Harris.
Why do you think, is there or was there rumblings that that coalition was sort of divided and that Harris would not really get the Jewish
That is
vote?
exactly what Donald Trump was trying to promote. They have an ad running now from the Republican Jewish coalition. I wouldn't vote for Kamala, is their comment. It's nuts.
Yeah. Well, they did a couple of things. I mentioned this a couple of days ago. Bless you, sir.
Excuse me, there's nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah, there you go. That's our John Rothmann. But I did see a couple of ads. We ran them here that were targeted, I think just yesterday we were talking about it, targeted to the Arab community in Michigan. And what they did was something deviously clever. They run the ad. It's a 30-second ad that celebrates the support of Israel on the part of Kamala Harris and mentions that her husband is Jewish and like a proud Jewish person who supports Israel. So this whole thing was done and wrapped in the sort of celebration of them as big supporters of Israel, knowing, and this is, again, it was targeted to the Arab community and Arab populations in Michigan. The idea being the more you reinforce how strong they are as allies of Israel, the more you ensure that that Arab community will vote against Kamala Harris.
No, you're absolutely right. It's insidious. And I will tell you that Jew hatred is on the rise. We've talked about it before. No question about it. I don't call it anti-Semitism. It's Jew hatred. And that is exactly what's being promulgated in all of this. And we need to resist it. I must tell you that I'm very worried about Michigan because carrying that state would ensure either Harris's victory or Trump's victory, if you believe the current lineup in terms of votes. And I underline and emphasize that. So 2 weeks from today, Mark, you and I will be analyzing the Electoral College and how that works.
It's pointed out in the chat, John, that a lot of Americans do vote against their own interests. It's an odd thing. You know, that's what I was talking about when I say the gut, or we're attracted or sparked to a leader because of charisma, because of family. There's so many things that go into this vote, and even as crucial as it is, I feel it goes off on some things that are kind of arbitrary.
Of course it is. In the end, we all vote based on our gut. And you have to understand the people who are committed to Donald Trump are deeply committed. And the people who oppose Donald Trump are going to do everything they can to see he loses. And the same thing applies to Kamala Harris. If you listen to Fox, as I do, you will understand very clearly that they want to make sure that Kamala Harris is not president. They're willing to excuse. They had Kash Patel this morning on Fox explaining away Donald Trump's absolutely nonsensical comments about Hitler. I mean, you know, there is a sense of denial that goes on. But I happen to believe the American people have very good sense. And so I'm hoping, and I say this because I am very partisan on this matter, I'm hoping that Kamala Harris wins the election. She has to, for the sake of American democracy.
Because Brother Rothmann mentioned this, I wonder, Albert, if you could get the actual recording, which is what was part of the Kelly remarks, that, you know, now when this has always been the case, but when you sit down with an interview subject, you not only jot down as a reporter what the person is saying, but you also record it. This has always been the way it is. But now, increasingly, with new media and the way in which we take in media, those audio recordings are critical. You really want to hear what the person is saying.
And Kelly was very clear. And may I add, not only was Kelly clear, but General Milley was clear, although we don't have a recording of that particular discussion, of what were termed fascist tendencies on the part of Donald Trump. Authoritarian.
So in that spirit, Albert, could you run a little bit? This is John Kelly talking about what, and again, I'll just remind everybody, John Kelly was closer to Trump than anyone in the last administration. He is the
longest serving chief of staff.
Yes, and as chief of staff, he was trying to support the president in every way he could. The president at that time, of course, Donald Trump. And this is a guy who is a straight shooter. Just his background, one has to have respect for. He lost his son in Afghanistan, okay? Now, this guy is true blue, and one takes, I think, his statements quite seriously in a way that one may not with some others who serve with Trump. Here, go ahead. This is John Kelly.
You commented more than once that, you know, that Hitler did some good things too. And of course, if you know history, again, I think he's lacking in that. But if you know what Hitler was all about, it'd be pretty hard to make an argument that he did anything good.
So what would you say when he said to you that Hitler did a lot of good things?
Well, I tell him that. I said, you know, sir, first of all, you should never say that. But if you knew what Hitler was all about from the beginning to the end, everything he did was in support of his racist, fascist life, philosophy, so that nothing he did you could argue was good. It was certainly not done for the right reason. And but he would occasionally say that.
What would he say when you would lay that out to him?
He just, that'd be the end of the conversation usually.
So, John, it's stated quite starkly there by a loyalist. John Kelly was a loyalist, loyal to Trump. Started as a Homeland Security head, and then he moved into the Chief of Staff role. So as the Chief of Staff, he was loyal to Trump. When he makes these stark comments, I think it's sobering.
It's not only him, it's General Milley. It's people like Mark Esper, the former Secretary of Defense. It's Mike Pence, the former Vice President of the United States of America. It's many of the people who Donald Trump surrounded himself with who are now saying, keep this guy out of the White House. I must tell you that the minute I heard General Kelly's recordings of what he said about Trump, it should scare the living bejeebers out of everyone. You know what shocked me? Not that Trump said it, but Republicans trying to excuse it. Well, that's just campaign rhetoric, or, well, he didn't really mean it, and then we have these kinds of comments where he didn't really mean it. And then Donald Trump, what does he do? He comes out and he says, of course I meant it. The enemy within. Well, let me tell you, I understand when you talk about poisoning the blood of America. That's what Hitler said in Germany. When you talk about the enemy within, that's what Hitler said in Germany. Now, I'm not comparing Donald Trump to Hitler, but I am saying that if his former chief of staff and the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff accuse Donald Trump of fascist tendencies, look, if it quacks like a duck, waddles like a duck, and looks like a duck, it's a duck, and Donald Trump is a duck.
Milley, who served as a chairman of the Joint Chiefs, of course, is what John is talking about. He was quoted in Bob Woodward's new book saying that Trump is a, quote, total fascist and the most dangerous person to this country.
And what Trump, does that say? It need people who are voting for Donald Trump, particularly Republicans, need to understand the implications of a Trump presidency. We, in the next 2 weeks, are going to make a fateful decision about the path on which this country will proceed. Now, let me tell you something, Mark. On the radio, I always try to be fair and objective. I try to present both sides. The Trump people always called me. They enjoyed me, even though they knew I disagreed with them. This is no joke. This is the future of the United States of America. And may I say, there's a wonderful book published by the University of California Press called Chiefs of Staff. It interviews chiefs of staff up to 1986. And when you read the role of a chief of staff, and then you realize what General Kelly is saying, the longest serving chief of staff for Donald Trump, it should be a sobering moment. And the fact that members of the Republican Party are willing to take Donald Trump and what he's saying and swallow it, knowing the danger that it represents, is what is really disturbing. I hope that Donald Trump goes down to a crashing defeat, and the Republican Party will then have to deal with the fact that they excused him. But anyway, I want also, and we talked earlier, Kamala Harris made a statement today from her office in Washington, from her home. And I think it's very important that people hear it, because I'm going to be listening if we have time.
Albert, you have that, right? Kamala Harris's remarks. Brother Rothman wants to opine on them and weigh in on them, as he should. But I would love for people to hear the remarks before, and we're not going to play all of them, but I'd love to play a little bit of Kamala Harris responding today to some of what's just gone down in the last day.
We have breaking news. Vice President Harris is speaking at the residence before she participates as a CNN town hall tonight in Chester Township. Let's listen.
He said he wanted generals like Adolf Hitler had. Donald Trump said that because he does not want a military that is loyal to the United States Constitution. He wants a military that is loyal to him. He wants a military who will be loyal to him personally. One that will obey his orders even when he tells them to break the law or abandon their oath to the Constitution of the United States. In just the past week, Donald Trump has repeatedly called his fellow Americans the enemy from within, and even said that he would use the United States military to go after American citizens. And let's be clear about who he considers to be the enemy from within. Anyone who refuses to bend a knee or dares to criticize him would qualify in his mind as the enemy within, like judges, like journalists, like nonpartisan election officials. It is deeply troubling and incredibly dangerous that Donald Trump would invoke Adolf Hitler, the man who is responsible for the deaths of 6 million Jews and hundreds of thousands of Americans. All of this is further evidence for the American people of who Donald Trump really is. This is a window into who Donald Trump really is, from the people who know him best, from the people who worked with him side by side in the Oval Office and in the Situation Room. And it is clear from John Kelly's words that Donald Trump is someone who, I quote, certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, who in fact vowed to be a dictator on day one and vowed to use the military as his personal militia to carry out his personal and political vendettas. Donald Trump is increasingly unhinged and unstable. And in a second term, people like John Kelly would not be there to be the guardrails against his propensities and his actions. Those who once tried to stop him from pursuing his worst impulses would no longer be there and no longer be there to rein him in. So the bottom line is this. We know what Donald Trump wants. He wants unchecked power. The question in 13 days will be, what do the American people want? Thank you.
And that's absolutely correct, Mark. 13 days. But I must tell you, never in my political life, working for Richard Nixon, having been involved in politics on every level, never have I been as angry, fearful, upset as I am today. When you have a former president of the United States quoting Adolf Hitler and saying he wants to have, well, I mean, it is unbelievable. So that's why I asked you to play that. And I'm going to tell you tonight, I will be listening to what Kamala Harris has to say in the town hall with CNN. More important, where the heck are the Republicans, for God's sake? They ought to be hanging their heads in shame.
I want to ask you about something I saw in the chat, and I don't think you're going to be able to really necessarily shed some light on it, but I never know, so I'll throw it out there. It seems as though there's an obsession almost with Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is the swing state with the juiciest electoral count, et cetera. Do you have a sense of a trend in Pennsylvania, is the question I keep seeing in the chat for you?
It's not just Pennsylvania. It's Michigan, which is also critical. It's Wisconsin, which is also critical. I would say on election night, if we were on the air together, as we have been in the past, that's where I'd be looking at these swing states. Do I have a sense? Look, I believe in the American people. I believe the American people fundamentally have good judgment. I believe when the American people hear these kinds of things, they will respond accordingly. Now, the fact is that about 20 million Americans have already gone to the polls and voted. You can't take your vote back. You can't redo it. By the way, I have a rule. I don't vote until the day of, because I never know what trends are going to be. I always remember when John Edwards was running for president and the scandal broke, and by the time we went to the polls, he was already out of the race, but so many people had voted absentee. This is a time when, frankly, I am looking for Republicans, Republican leadership, to stand up and speak out, because only the Republicans themselves can cure this evil. And it is an evil. I want to be crystal clear. I'm not an overly emotional person. I am very logical when it comes to my politics. May I give you one other thing? Do you know that Donald Trump said if he is elected president, he's going to invoke the Alien and Sedition Act of 1789? Google it, for heaven's sake.
Well, you can tell everybody what is that act used to do?
It would give him the right to expel people from this country unilaterally. And
so
by
that's
the way,
that's the
only
way in
part,
which you go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's the only part of the Alien and Sedition Act which still stands. And may I remind you, when Franklin Roosevelt authorized the roundup of the Japanese in 1941, he did it using the Alien and Sedition Act. Can you imagine Donald Trump admitting he would use that power? It is absolutely unacceptable. And why this isn't a major national issue is, to me, well, maybe tonight Kamala Harris will, in the process of her interview on CNN with Anderson Cooper, really raise these issues. They ought to be, aggressively.
So it is those three swing states. Those are critical, as you say. And I don't think you can tell too much. You can look at trends and see that Trump is trending up. You can look at other trends from other aggregators of polls and see that Harris is trending up. I think it's all within the margin of error from what everyone's been able to see, as you know. So it's very, very hard to say. And even I would say that early voting, which was generally historically associated with a Democratic surge in voting, that now, I mean, Georgia had a record first day of voting, as you're aware. That isn't necessarily the case anymore. I was reading a piece yesterday about the fact that the GOP vote, very animated, and it's very possible that they were a big part of that Georgia surge.
You're right. That's what makes this so concerning. This is something that the American people really have to grasp. Most Americans have not yet voted. What happens in the next few days is going to be critical. But I believe with perfect faith that in the end, if you talk sense to the American people, if they listen, they will understand. May I tell you that Lech Wałęsa, the leader of Polish Solidarity, issued a statement last week essentially saying the idea of Donald Trump as president is appalling. It's scary. It's wrong. And this is something people have to understand. May I tell you that I've talked to people who support Donald Trump who dismiss these kinds of concerns and say, no, we know he just talks. Let me tell you something. When somebody says they're going to come and do something, you better believe them. That's what politics is all about. That's
well, certainly, by the way, I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, politics is all about a lot of stuff that never happens and promises. But I think in the case of Donald Trump, you've seen him pay off. He paid off with the Supreme Court justices, with a Muslim ban.
I agree.
He comes in really heavy. Here is from mountain bike fan, darn John Kelly waiting until now to put this out there. I think Kelly did it to clear his conscience, but if Trump wins because Kelly waited until now, that wasn't right of Kelly to wait.
Kelly didn't wait. Kelly made a statement several months ago, and it was very clear, and I talked about it on this program as well as on my podcast. And John Kelly clearly has made his statement, but why is he doing it now? There is a fear abroad in the land. There is a concern that people may not remember because our memories are relatively short. I think that what John Kelly is saying, what General Milley is saying, what Mike Pence is saying, what Mark Esper is saying, what the others who work with Donald Trump every day. Do you remember The Apprentice, the whole idea of firing someone? Let me tell you, Mark, before you hire somebody, you check their references. You and I have been through this over many times. You're always checking. The references, the people who Donald Trump said were closest to him are now opposing him. They are against him. And the people who are supporting him now are excusing these absolutely outrageous comments.
I do think that what John is saying is so true. I find most effective the spots, 30-second spots, whatever they might be, however they list these spots in the virality of YouTube or whatever, from the Espers, the Boltons of the world, those who I don't necessarily associate with some sort of righteous causes. They were within the Trump White House. They saw him operate, and you cannot find any one of them that will say anything that's positive about this guy, but it goes beyond that. It wasn't like some sort of just political spat within the Oval, right, John? They felt as though this guy is utterly incompetent and dangerous to national security, in the thrall of leaders like Putin and despots worldwide wanting to be one himself. These are his people saying that.
That's right. And you're going to play, I think you said Albert had it, the discussion between Liz Cheney and Kamala Harris. Look, Liz Cheney is a conservative Republican. She disagrees with Kamala Harris on virtually every major issue, but she puts her country first. And that, to me, is the key. We need to have people like Liz Cheney, like Dick Cheney, with whom we also had massive disagreements. They are doing. By the way, do you know that Dick Cheney?
We do not need Dick Cheney, and I'm going to draw the line there.
Hold on, no.
I would S-can Dick Cheney. He's a despicable, grotesque historical figure.
Dick Cheney was chief of staff to Gerald Ford. I don't know if you know that. And he understands the role of a chief of staff. Part of his reaction has to do with General Kelly's remarks. And when you have former chiefs of staff who speak out on this question, I don't disregard anything, because this is a mortal danger to America.
Sure, I get it. The fact that Dick Cheney is right about Trump being a danger doesn't wash his record of
nobody's talking about his record.
War crimes that he was part of. We're
not talking about Dick Cheney's record. We're talking about the fact that Donald Trump, if he's president of the United States, as Kamala Harris said today, all the bars on his conduct will be off. There won't be any limit to him.
Completely agree. Roll the tape that Brother Rothman wants, which is this is very important. What John Rothman is saying is one plank of what they're trying to lay down, which is look at all the GOP, as John has just said, to disagree maybe on policy, but agree that there's an overwhelming need for a Harris vote in this case. So that's what they're out with. They're out with GOP for Kamala Harris, in effect. And this is Kamala Harris with Liz Cheney. Go ahead. We'll watch a little bit of it.
If you tell us, but you start, you've actually marshaled unprecedented support from Republicans in this election. Why do you think that is?
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for being here and for your work. And the Congresswoman, thank you. I have said before, and it must be repeated each time, there are moments in the history of our country which challenge us, each of us, to really decide, do we stand for those things that we talk about, including a particular country over party. And you have been extraordinarily courageous in the way that you have done that, and I thank you for that.
With its 120.
May I point out to you, Mark, that there are over 200 Republicans running for political office who still say that they accept the fact that Donald Trump really won the election of 2020.
Yeah,
anyone who says that ought to be defeated for election.
Completely agree. Continue, please, Albert.
Sorry.
So, you know, I have in my career now, whether it was as the elected district attorney, elected attorney general, and then elected United States senator, and of course now vice president, I've counted that I have taken the oath of office 6 times. And for the elected leaders here, we know it is an oath that one must take sincerely and unequivocally, which is an oath, among other things, to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and to understand what those principles represent and what they require of the individual who holds the office in the public trust. And let's not undervalue that point as well. It is not about the individual. It is not about what is in their personal interest. It is about what is for and in the spirit of the public good. And this is a moment in this election that presents a real contrast among how I, as one of the 2 nominees, and my opponent, the former president, think of that duty. And it is a duty, by the way. There are certain things in our lives that we have the choice if we feel like it. And then there are certain things that are just fundamentally a duty, like to raise our children, things of that nature. It is a duty to take seriously that oath and do it for the sake of the public good and in the public trust. And I think that this moment, with the choice that the American people have in this election in 2 weeks and 1 day, this election is presenting, for the first time probably in certainly recent history, a very clear choice and difference between the 2 nominees.
I would have started with that. She finished with that. Okay, the point I'll swing around to is that's why Obama is a better surrogate, John. You can say people don't vote for surrogates, but he makes a much more emphatic case than does Kamala Harris. I found her, of course, the substance of what she's saying is absolutely true, but I just feel as though, in this urgent time, and again, a lot of this depends on the forum, too. It's a quieter forum, so she's not, she can't speak with the passion, for example, or just even the volume that Obama did. But I just feel, boy, Barack Obama is just way ahead of her in terms of his magic.
Clinton. Bill Clinton is saying the same thing. We have former presidents. Let me point out to you, there is not a former president or former Republican vice president who is voting for Donald Trump. And that, to me, George W. Bush, with all due respect, hasn't said what he's going to do. He said he's staying out of it. But we understand very clearly what's at stake here. And I want to thank you, Mark, because I think what we are doing now in bringing this to light is so important for people to understand. And I really respectfully tell you, I always try to be objective. I'm no longer trying to be objective in this campaign. Donald Trump's presidency would be too dangerous. And I'll tell you what really worries me is if he wins, the kinds of discussions you and I are going to have, I believe, will be even more fearful. So we're doing everything we can in every forum, in every speech I give, in every podcast I deliver, in every public appearance I make, and I'm making quite a few in the next week, to make this point. And we just have to see how it plays.
John, it is great to visit with you always. We'll look forward to next Wednesday and appreciate your perspectives.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for doing this, and thank you for allowing us, me, to express my views as strongly as I am.
Well, thank you for thanking me, if I can say. John Rothmann is the host of Around the Political World with John Rothmann. Find his podcast and find John across the Twitterverse, across the universe, across the webverse. and across the podcast verse.
And on the
Love
Mark Thompson Show.
And here on Wednesdays. It'll always happen. Thank you, John. John Rothmann, everybody. Right on, right
on. The Mark Thompson Show.
Boy, that was a jam-packed visit with John Rothmann, but I cannot be dissuaded from getting right into a world away from politics for a few minutes. I'd call it a kind of a palate cleanser, really, from the toxicity, from the acidity, from the acerbidity of politics to the magic, the potential, the wonderment of the cosmos, my friends. How about it? For the great astronomer, he is the Neil deGrasse Tyson of this show and of the Bay Area, the longtime professor of astronomy, Professor Andrew Fraknoi, everyone. Yes. Look at you. Happy, distinct from all the madness. I love it.
Well, and sometimes I read the newspaper and I want to be on Mars rather than this planet. So I hear you.
I really got, interested again. I say because I feel as though some things happen in the cosmos and we can see things in the night sky, and some things are extraordinary that we can see in the night sky. And it gets me all of a sudden, again, focused on something that I can we take the night sky and everything for granted a little bit. And so here's the point. There was a comet, and I think this comet that comes through and becomes somewhat visible to us, it's like a once in 80,000 year type comet. Isn't that right, Professor Fraknoi?
That's right. It's a new comet that we hadn't seen before. We're still not sure exactly what its orbit is, but it's showing up right now in our evening sky. It's fainter now, so you have to know where to look, and we can talk about that. But it's a wonderful example of the leftovers from the formation of our solar system. When our family of planets and the sun formed, janitorial services were not particularly good. And so there was a lot of stuff left over, and the rocky stuff we call asteroids and the icy stuff we call comets. And because this is an icy leftover chunk, when it gets near the sun, the ice evaporates and makes a beautiful tail. And as you can see on the chyron below us, this comet has a name. It's called Tsuchinshan Atlas. Tsuchinshan is the observatory in China, and Atlas is the observatory in South Africa that jointly discovered this comet. And just to be able to refer to it, we call it 2023 A3, which is a lot easier to say.
Now, that view that we're seeing of the comet right now that is showing on screen, that's through a telescope, right?
Right. So you can't see anything like this with your naked eye. But if you are in a dark sky area and you can look after sunset, you'll see a bright object right after sunset in the lower part of the west-southwest sky. That's the planet Venus. And if you look above Venus, you will, particularly have binoculars, you'll be able to see a fuzzy object. And then if you take a long exposure photograph like this, you'll see that it has a long tail stretching upward in the way we see it now. And it's a beautiful chunk of cosmic ice left over from ancient days evaporating before your eyes.
So, Professor Fraknoi, one of your superpowers, I've always felt, was and is the ability to boil complicated stuff down, because there's a lot of physics and math and all this stuff when it comes to the cosmos and comes to astronomy. And so I only have you for a couple minutes, so try to make this as succinct as possible, if you can even do this. But tell me how scientists like yourself can somehow identify this comet, which again only comes through every 80,000 years, and anticipate its arrival. I mean, it's not like you saw the last one and then somehow could extrapolate. I don't understand the math that goes into this analysis that you guys do that can actually predict when these things happen.
Well, for once, your compliments are not deserved, although we appreciate them. We had no idea this comet was coming. We were surprised. This is a discovery of something brand new that we hadn't seen before. 80,000 years ago when it came through the last time, there wasn't anybody having, podcasts or keeping even written records. So this was a complete surprise.
Well, then let me go back then. Excuse me for interrupting, Professor, but let me ask you, then how do we know this comet came through 80,000 years ago?
And I want to emphasize that the 80,000 is still not a definite figure. Could be longer, could be shorter. But what we can observe is its orbit, how it's moving.
I see.
When you know how it's moving around the sun, you can extrapolate it to see how it moves around further out. And that tells you the orbit. And then we can figure out how long it takes at that distance to go around the sun. So our best guess right now is 80,000 years.
So in my apocalyptic movie-oriented scenario and narratives, could there be a similar comet, Professor Fraknoi, that tumbles toward Earth and surprises us and could be our undoing as a species?
Well, it's certainly possible. An asteroid is much more likely to be on an orbit that is directly aimed at us.
And why is that?
Because the asteroids are much closer in, and there's a whole bunch of them that are actually just flying randomly around the solar system, whereas most of the comets are further out and are therefore less likely to come into the inner neighborhood where we live. But let me just say, because it flashed below us for a moment, if people want to have a kind of map of the sky to know where to point their binoculars to see this comet, I put a map in my blog. So I have a website, fraknoi.com. You don't need to write down this whole long address. Just go to fraknoi.com, Fraknoi, and there click on the menu choice for the blog, and there you will see this beautiful map. Thank you so much for showing it. And that shows you for each date in October just where in the sky to point your binoculars in the west-southwest to see the comet tonight. And if you can't do it, or if you don't have binoculars or dark skies, just Google Comet 223A3, and all over the web there are gorgeous images, beautiful images people have taken with big telescopes and small telescopes, and it's worth looking for. It's really quite a nice sight with its long tail.
But let's get back to my end of the world scenario, please, Professor. In our last moment, you're saying that it is possible that an asteroid, which wasn't picked up on your general scope of attention, it's possible that just as this comet surprised, an asteroid could surprise, and it could be the end of things.
It could be, but I'm happy to tell you that astronomers around the world are working to actually find and catalog all the asteroids that come near the Earth. We think we're 90% done with the catalog of those that could hurt the entire planet, the big ones. So 90% is not as good as 100%, but we're making progress. So you have a team of astronomers trying to prevent your scenario.
Randy's asking, what is Mark's obsession with an end-of-the-world comet or an end-of-the-world asteroid event? Well, my obsession is that because the comet was a surprise, I just thought I would ask. Yeah. I resent that my audience somehow doesn't understand the seriousness of this.
Why are you yelling?
So
not just you. Astronomers are also concerned. We should tell your listeners that this is a #1 serious concern for astronomers. 65 million years ago, the dinosaurs, we think, were wiped out by just such an asteroid.
Thank you, Professor.
Want to follow in their wake.
Thank you, Professor. And Randy, take that. And the other thing I would say is, from what I recall from astronomy, I always loved astronomy, even though I'm only about an inch deep on it. The planet Jupiter, as I recall, was an important blocking mechanism for the Earth's evolution. In other words, many of the things that might have actually hit Earth and ruined or set back the evolution of this planet were actually blocked by the planet Jupiter because it's of immensity, right?
Right. You are well informed. The largest planet with the greatest gravity in the solar system is Jupiter. So its gravity acts a little bit like a vacuum cleaner, pulling in more things. And so we do think that we're a little bit safer because of Jupiter's effect of pulling those asteroids to it. And Jupiter is an all gas and liquid planet, so those asteroids just splash down and they don't hurt anything.
It's a remarkable thing. I think the night sky is just a wonderment of mystery, and we're seeing history, right? Because the light takes time to get to us. So literally, we're looking back millions of years.
That's right. Now with the James Webb Space Telescope, we're actually looking back billions of years. We're seeing some of the earliest stars and galaxies. And as you say, when the news on Earth gets you down, it's really a good thing to put your mind into a cosmic frame and think about and learn a little bit more about astronomy.
Professor, I want you to return, and next time you come back, I have questions about black holes, because I understand that there are differing opinions now about some of the science around black holes, but I want to table that for the next time. I also want to just encourage people, we put it up there again, to Professor Fraknoi's website. Again, it's Fraknoi.com. It's a blog, it's a website, and you've done so much work. I love the fact that the OpenStax work that you've done makes the astronomy textbook free. And for those who have an interest in that and really want to get into a text, again, the lead author is Professor Andrew Fraknoi. You know how I feel about you. I love that you come spend some time with us occasionally, and I look forward to the next time.
I do too. Thank you, Mark.
Professor Andrew Fraknoi, everybody. Happy comet gazing, everyone.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Everybody loves Professor Fraknoi. I do too. Wow. Cameo. Thank you, Andrew Fraknoi. What a discovery. He just makes things, easier to understand.
No.
So that is our palate cleanser for all of you who just felt you needed a swift break from politics. We give it to you. Now, I have important Edward Lee. What was this? Oh, Coachella. Buy that man a Coachella Valley coffee or a beer. That's right. Well, I do have my Coachella Valley coffee always at arm's.
The Mark Thompson Show.
That's not what I was looking for. I was looking for that. It is its own kind of magic, I really must say. And that Coachella Valley coffee you can get at CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. And I might add that if you go there, you can find tea, coffee. It's a terrific website and a compendium of all that is magical. And so I didn't know. It was just seemed like the thing to say.
Compendium is totally dingable.
Compendium is a ding word big time. You're right. And so enter our discount code if you've not gone there before, because you're going to go there and you go, wow, there's just so much stuff here. And it's not like super discounted old crop. This is fresh, new crop. That's the reason these coffee beans are so special, hand roasted, tasting notes for so many of the beans and so many of the blends. I think it's the best coffee I've ever tasted. And I've been drinking coffee for a long time all around the world. I've had Turkish coffee, I've had Vietnamese coffie, I've had coffee in Latin America, in Chile, etc. So I just encourage you to check it out. Yes, I'm. Do you know
who I am?
I'm kind of a big deal. I'm a coffee drinker internationally. All is all I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen. So, you need to go check it out. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Mark T at checkout. So here's what's happening on the show for those who want to get your hymnals out.
The Mark Thompson Show.
You'll turn to the news page in your hymnals. Kim will provide some news. There's a lot going on in the world, not just what we've talked about in the way of politics or in the way of astronomy. And then we have a conversation with a public radio host of a podcast that focuses on what's happening with college campuses and the conversations around college campuses, protests and anger, as well as just the way issues settle on college campuses. That is to say, the way issues land on college campuses and within that group of young people, emerging voters on college campuses. So that will follow Kim's news. Smash the damn like button. It helps
Smash
us.
it with your
costs
iron rod.
you nothing. Smash
it with
like
your
a
iron
boss.
rod.
Share this show across social media. That also costs you nothing. Facebook, Twitter, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. If you're TikToking, I just ask that you talk with a tick that features this show and a link to this show. It helps grow this show. So thank you. Tomorrow, I'm going to recognize some key PayPal people. You know, we've just finished our 2nd anniversary, and I was going through some of the new PayPal folk, or some people who've been on PayPal, as we're the only way that we sustain the show, aside from super stickers and super chats, which happen every day, but we can't count on those. So it's Patreon and PayPal. And there are Patreon and PayPal links under all our videos. And so on our 2nd anniversary, I was just going through, and I saw all of these people who really stepped up and added to their normal PayPal amount, or began with a fresh, high level of PayPal support. It was extraordinary. And I want to mention some of them by name, but all of them will be included in the scroll at the end of every show, because every show wouldn't happen without you, who are part of our Patreon and PayPal community. So once a month we update that. So if you go to PayPal today and you make a contribution and it's a monthly contribution, we'll get your name on there, but it doesn't happen until the end of the month. Tony updates everything at the end of the month. So if you want to support the show, visit themarkthompsonshow.com. That's also an option for you. Click Patreon or PayPal to contribute. By the way, themarkthompsonshow.com, it's weird. If you have Spectrum, which is a internet provider, and that's the one that I have, literally that web provider is funky with our website. Even though we've paid for all the certificates and we've paid for all the security, like we're a totally secure site, it still flags us for some reason. We've talked to Spectrum and we've talked to, this is like getting into the weeds, but this is the crap that we have to deal with now. But if you can still reach us on, through mobile, like cell phone, it won't kick it out. And for most internet providers, it's not an issue. But for Spectrum in Southern California, particularly, they're just a bear and a beast, and we don't know what we can do. So we've done everything on our end to secure our site. You should at least know that. TheMarkThompsonShow.com, click Patreon or PayPal, and those links, as I say, are below all of our videos as well, and that's a way to support the show. All right, Kim's news, and then a conversation about politics and colleges in America.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report is sponsored by Coachella Valley Coffee. Just under 2 weeks remain before the presidential election. Former President Trump heading to the battleground state of Georgia for a town hall this afternoon. Will there be dancing? Who knows? Then he'll hold a rally later tonight. Vice President Kamala Harris will be in Pennsylvania, also holding a town hall hosted by CNN. As seen earlier here on the Mark Thompson Show, Vice President Harris says former President Trump's alleged positive comments about Adolf Hitler are a window into who he is. In an interview with the New York Times, former Trump White House Chief of Staff John Kelly said Trump commented more than once that Hitler did some good things too. He went on to say Trump meets the general definition of a fascist. The Trump campaign spokesperson responding to Kelly's comments by saying he totally beclowned himself by telling debunked stories about the Trump administration. Meanwhile,
if I'm just thinking about what John was saying about job interview and about references. Yeah. Meets the dictionary definition of a fascist would not be something you'd want someone to say in relation to your last work.
Next candidate, please. Yeah.
We're looking at this Donald J. Trump guy. What was your experience with him? I know you worked as chief of staff. he's a fascist, I would say, definitionally, he is, he's a full-on fascist, through and through fascist, wants to undercut democracy, and frankly, he's a national security threat. Wow, okay,
So
well.
I can assume you wouldn't hire him again.
Yeah. Unreal. What a country.
Meanwhile, early voting is starting in what's expected to be an extremely close election. A University of Florida tracker reports more than 24 million people have already voted. The professor behind the tracker says the figures don't show the actual candidate votes, but we do know that a lot of people are voting early.
And as I was just saying before, and I'll just state it quickly here in 10 seconds or left, historically, that would be a huge Democratic push, but now you can't say that, because the GOP is animated, and there's a big GOP surge as well.
Stocks are falling on Wall Street. The Dow Jones Industrial Average has dropped more than 500 points at times today. S&P 500 has been down more than 1%, and the Nasdaq has been down by more than 375 points throughout the session. This comes as Treasury yields rise, as investors have concerns about the Federal Reserve. They may not cut interest rates at their next meeting, so concerns for that. The United States Postal Service says mail-in ballots are being delivered without much issue. Officials say 99.9% of mail-in ballots were delivered within 7 days during the first 3 weeks of October. They added 99.7% were delivered within 3 days. The Postal Service is urging voters to mail their ballots at least 1 week before Election Day to ensure on-time delivery. And they have implemented a number of extra measures this election, including extra deliveries and pickups, to make sure that that happens. American Airlines must pay a $50 million penalty over their treatment of passengers with disabilities. The Department of The Department of Transportation accused the company of not providing proper physical assistance to customers and their wheelchairs. Injuries have been reported, spanning from 2019 to 2023. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg said in a statement, "The era of tolerating poor treatment of airline passengers with disabilities is over." Meanwhile, American Airlines denies claims of legal wrongdoing with that.
What the hell is going on in the United States of America?
Really? Yeah, thank you. Ron gets it.
One wonders. A California task force is making a big dent in keeping illegal cannabis off the streets. Teams across the state destroyed nearly 775,000 marijuana plants this year and 106,000 pounds of processed weed. Altogether, it was worth $353 million.
That's an itty bitty bit of weed.
Well, it's more than an itty bitty bit.
That's a lot of weed.
Where are my weed smokers? Where are my weed smokers
Thank
at?
you, Albert. We both had the same thought.
Raids were carried out in 36 counties, with Riverside having the most plants seized at 136,000. Mendocino County just under that, followed by the counties of Kern, Siskiyou, and Fresno.
This is Casey Kasem in Hollywood.
Yeah, Riverside County, #1 in our survey with seeds from marijuana, followed by Riverside County and followed by Mendocino County. On with the countdown. It's marijuana.
This is Casey Kasem in Hollywood.
All right, #1 is Riverside County in California.
Efforts are underway for the
And
first...
I also want to know what happened to the pictures I was supposed to see this week.
Please, we don't need to. It was a little thing. A little diversion. I don't need to, a full plate full of Casey.
They do this to me all the time. I don't know what the hell they do it for.
Come on. Okay. I'm sorry, Kim. I really am sorry.
Efforts are underway for the
This is Casey Kasem in Hollywood.
Stop it, Albert. Kim is in the middle of her news. I'm really sorry, Kim.
That's okay.
Albert, this is outrageous. I don't know what happened. He gets into these moods.
Albert, thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Trying to get the first Southern California city to let people smoke pot at public events. Long Beach is getting the green light for a step one. Council members agreeing to the commission study to see how a permit might work and the benefits, calling this an opportunity to make the city an entertainment destination. Go to a concert, smoke a bit of weed.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
I know. That's his 3 oh my gods. I love that. Yeah.
Last month, the state fair in Sacramento became the first in the county to allow cannabis to be sold and consumed on site. Long Beach, next up.
Wow.
God bless America. The end.
The only thing, I'm just going to say one thing, and I've got nothing against weed. In fact, as I'm weeding a lot, although I do edibles. And the reason I do edibles is I just can't take the lung and throat kind of harshness. But I have to say that when you have everybody getting high all around you, you're smelling that. I don't know. I could see where the contact high is sort of it's a real thing, and it might be kind of an unwanted thing. I don't mean to be the, grandpa who doesn't want any, but I'm just saying, I don't know. I'm all for it. I just don't know how you manage it, like, from the standpoint of the contact high and the, and I don't know.
It just depends on the event. I mean, if I'm going to with a million teenage girls to a Taylor Swift concert,
right?
Maybe not the right place. The Veterans Parade, maybe not the right place. But, if the Grateful Dead cover band comes to town, have at it.
Well, okay. Yeah, I get the point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That's pure speculation.
Okay. Yeah.
Efforts are underway for Tesla's new cybercab to hit the streets of Palo Alto. They're really doing this. The city plans to test this robotaxi sedan and van. The van is really interesting. Have you seen that thing? Since its official shuttle service runs out of funding in 8 months. So Tesla still needs a license to pick up passengers, but city leaders are hoping to speed this process up and get the Tesla cybercab and the Tesla van on the streets of Palo Alto. There's the cybercab. We robot. Yeah.
It looks cool, as we have said, but
the cab is really interesting. It looks like it's from the future. So,
yeah.
The city of Oakland putting more eyes in the sky to crack down on illegal dumping. They are watching you. The city has been using surveillance cameras for a couple of years, but they're adding more of them to catch people in the act. And lastly, LA Dodgers star Shohei Ohtani's historic 50-50 ball, it sold at auction. You want to guess how much it cost? How much it went for?
How much did the 50-50? Okay.
How much was it? Don't look it up. Don't Google it.
No, don't look it up, people. Don't look it up. What are we? I'm going to see what guesses there are in the chat.
It would be hilarious if it were that his old translator's gambling debt, like the exact same number.
11,780, says John Watson. Of course, I get it. $1 million, says Julie.
Higher.
Pietro says $2 million.
Higher.
Okay, 500,000. That isn't going to get it done. John, 50 is not going to get it done. 4.8 million, says RJ Dunn. That seems high to me, maybe. No, is that the 50-50?
I'll give it to him. He's close. This ball sold at auction for $4,392,000.
Wow, that is good, RJ Dunn.
Maybe RJ looked it up. I don't know. $4,392,000, the highest price paid for any sports ball sold in history. Ohtani hit that ball for a home run in Miami last month, becoming the first player in Major League history to hit 50 home runs and steal 50 bases in the same season. That's
a remarkable
little ball.
And this is a rehab year for him. Isn't that what? Isn't that right? I believe that's right, Albert. Isn't that right, Commish?
Yeah, he's not pitching this year. He's a one-way player. He's usually a two-way player, which makes him a very valued asset. But yeah, only batting, and he's still breaking records.
One thing I would just mention, because you are talking about the Dodgers, they are in the World Series. There is Shohei Ohtani. He was, in Southern California with the Angels, and he was still great, but he didn't get the kind of profile that he's gotten at Los Angeles, which just
better
right up the road from Anaheim. Yeah. Better team around him, and maybe the Dodgers are just better at marketing. But I mean, look, what he's doing, his achievements don't really need a marketing team. They're super extraordinary. I did want to mention, though, the loss and the passing of another Los Angeles Dodger, and I think all of baseball mourns the passing of Fernando Valenzuela. He was only 63 years old, and he was really a big part of that organization, the Dodgers organization. You see the uniform that Ohtani's wearing. It was worn also by Fernando Valenzuela, and he was a longtime Spanish broadcaster. He did the Spanish play-by-play, for the Dodgers and really did so well. I don't know if you got a picture of Fernando Valenzuela. You can rally one, Albert. There he is. There's Fernando. He had that thing where he looked up toward the sky as he would, get a pitch going. He was one of the most impactful players of his generation, said Rob Manfred. He's the commissioner of baseball. Yeah. And the Dodgers, so it was both his distinctive pitching style, but also his virtuosity on the mound that generated a lot of excitement. And, there's a big Mexican community in Southern California that rallied around him, and they called it Fernando Mania. His 1981 season ranks among the most decorated pitching years of all time. He won the National League Rookie of the Year, the NL Cy Young Award winner, and a Silver Slugger, and a World Series champion. Fernando Valenzuela, again, passes away at 63, way too young, and it's a sad passing at that. So,
well, on that note, I'm Kim McAllister, and this is the Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Thank you, everyone. It is a Wednesday show. We've focused on a lot of stuff, politics. We've given you a little bit of what's going on in the cosmos. What follows is a conversation about college life and campus life on college campuses and in college environments in America. They've been the center of a lot of attention politically and beyond, that is to say culturally. And so we have a conversation all about that with someone who has developed a podcast series which focuses on just that, the collegiate environment in regards to many of the issues that have been focused around politics and around the culture. So let's get it on. Go for it, Albert.
We have processes and protocols and standards.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Check it out. We've got a special guest, and he is part of a series of it's a podcast. It's a podcast series, really, that looks at college campuses. Kirk Carapezza. Is that Carapezza?
Carapezza in Italiano.
All right. Well, more or less. All right. Yeah. Thank you for the charity applause. Kirk is the host of College Uncovered. The podcast really looks at what's going on college campuses, and you and John Marcus, your co-host, the podcast College Uncovered examines, I suppose, a lot of what we've seen, which is associated with encampments on campus, Gaza pushback. I assume voting rights are included. The women's reproductive freedoms are probably all things that come up, I would think, Kirk, in this adventure that you have been on at U.S. college campuses. So take us through it, because you're more than just a reporter. You really try to sort of embed yourself with this community so that you could get some answers.
Right. Yeah. I'm kind of the tour guide in this podcast. I look relatively young. I'm not that close to the college experience, but I kind of go undercover on college campuses and really try to talk to students and, faculty and professors about what's really going on behind the headlines. Because like a lot of things in America, not everything is exactly as it seems with college campuses. But the bottom line is,
what were you surprised by right out of the chute?
I think, well, one thing is, if you watch cable news, if you watch Fox or CNN, or you read the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, you would think that most college campuses are on fire, or they were on fire in the spring. And that's really not the case, right? There were, even here in Boston, where we have hundreds of college campuses, there were 4 encampments. One at Tufts, one at Emerson, one at MIT, one at Harvard, right? And it got tense. It was intense. But the reality is, I think a lot of people, and, NPR and the member stations were guilty of this too. It's easy to just try to start drawing comparisons to the Vietnam War era and saying, look, these campus protests, all these kids are woke and they've taken over their college campuses. The numbers don't bear that out. We're talking about thousands of students, right? During Vietnam War era, there were millions of students, and it was on every single college campus, right? The arrest and the response to this and how colleges are responding to this. Now, there's a story there. There's a lot of friction, right? These schools and administrators don't want a repeat of what we saw on some college campuses last spring. And there is a real debate about free speech and what's going on. But what we try to do is kind of, cover the protests, but really look at what's going on in the classroom. What do classroom discussions actually sound like? And one idea that's gaining traction is to really promote more productive dialogue in and out of the classroom. Because what I hear from professors, friends who are professors, sources, is that kids are just afraid to talk these days, right? We're talking about a generation that went through puberty on social media. They went through the pandemic on Zoom, and now they're landing on college campuses, and some of them have never made eye contact with someone with whom they might disagree. And so the professors that I talk to is when they try to talk about hot button issues, whether it's the war in Gaza or reproductive rights or LGBTQ issues, there's a new philosophy that's just silence is safer. So no one's even talking to each other. And I think that's far more interesting because that trend affects many more students than the handful of students who are protesting on college campuses.
So if they're not talking to each other, Kirk, it's so bizarre then that I see, and you're right, I'm really hostage to media reports. I see these, vociferous, angry, like just throwing these rhetorical Molotov cocktails at each other in these loud ass protests on college campuses. And then you're telling me that they're not even speaking to each other because they're so worried about the repercussions. And by the way, that tracks. That makes sense to me. But I'm just wondering, so these are exceptions to the rule that we're seeing, or again, media is just amplifying it?
Yeah, I think the media is amplifying it, but also it plays into this national narrative that we're seeing where, at a time when fewer people are going to college, right? Fewer Americans are choosing college straight out of high school. Right. And we can debate about the value of college and whether everyone needs to go. But one of the key takeaways on our podcast is, not everyone needs to go to college, but somebody needs to go to college. And in our economy, especially in states like Massachusetts, we demand more education, right? We need more people to get educations beyond high school. But when you look at the surveys and once you get beyond cost, one of the number one reasons why people are saying they're not choosing college is because they're too woke or they're too liberal or they're too progressive or their values don't reflect my values here in my hometown. The reality, Mark, is most Americans go to college within 25 miles of their hometown and they work while they're in school, right? They believe in their college because in some states, I went to Tennessee recently for some reporting and I went to the University of Tennessee, Martin. It's the number one employer in Weakley County. Right when Goodyear packed up shop and went overseas, UT Martin became the top employer. And these rural voters, rural citizens who are conservative, it's Trump country. I think 90% of Weakley County went for Trump, right? They believe in the promise of education. They believe in the promise of technology and higher education there in their community. But again, you poll Americans and they're losing trust in higher ed. And I think college leaders that I speak to, they're waking up to this and they're realizing, you know what, we may not buy the narrative that we're too woke or too liberal, but we need to listen to our critics because if we don't, they're going to be, these schools are going to be complicit in their own demise. And we're seeing that 1 in 4 Americans are now ruling out colleges based on state politics, which is wild, right? So
that's fascinating.
How
much that, Kirk, is really responding to an objective reality on campus? That is to say, there really is a wokeism that's sort of become a contagion at all of these high-level universities and colleges? And how much is the rhetoric that's just become louder and has been knocked around the echo chamber so that there's a wokeism on campus, but it's not necessarily reflected? That's what I think is so interesting about you and your co-host, that you've gone to these campuses. And I'm wondering how much of it is really reflected by what's on campus. I mean, how much wokeism is there and how much is it just kind of just a rap on colleges that it's all so woke?
I think it depends on the college where you are, right? I went to UMass Boston, which is, here in Dorchester, and I might as well have been on another planet, right? These students are working, 70% of them are working while they're in school. When the encampments went up here in Boston, I was actually reporting a story in Northwest Missouri, where Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, and Missouri all meet. I might as well have been on another planet, Mark, right? These students were not talking about these hot button issues, right? All they care about is getting a degree and getting a better job, right? That's the majority of college kids. And I just think that's important to keep in mind. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't cover the flash button issues and the fact that some of this, some of the polarization on college campuses is leading to this silence is safer philosophy, where people are afraid of speaking because they might offend somebody. That's dangerous, right? That's bad for democracy too. But our job is just to kind of pull back the curtain a little bit and look at what's actually happening on college campuses, because what you see on TV all the time isn't necessarily what's going on in the ground truth.
So you talk about the urban-rural divide. I'm just looking through the episode list again for your podcast, and it feels as though we all understand the urban-rural divide. I mean, it's easy to get your head to that place, kind of. Were there other divisions that you began to see, sort of cleavage that appears to you after spending time in and around these college areas?
Yeah, I would say, the debate over student loan debt is fascinating. That has just been a roller coaster ride of, student loan debt that's been going on for decades now. There have been, promises of loan forgiveness from the Biden and Obama administrations, lawsuits, more promises of loan relief, more lawsuits. The idea that, forgiving even part of those loans is like a political minefield. Now, here in the Northeast, you walk out on the street and ask people whether the government should forgive loans. The vast majority would probably say yes, but this is, this really gets to the heart of the matter, I think, where people who didn't borrow to go to college, already paid back their loans, or didn't go to college at all, want to know why on earth should they be paying for someone else's degree that might not be able to earn them enough money to pay off the loans they took out. And I think that was a real divide that we saw. The rural urban divide is really fascinating, because a lot of these schools, it leads to our experts told us that the divide between the rural and the urban, where some of these rural schools are cutting programs left and right. And that's really leading to this politics of resentment.
Wait a minute. Let me just get clear on why are they cutting these programs? Because of
funding issues.
Funding. Oh, that's what I thought.
Issues,
it's funding,
right? Yeah, funding.
It's not politics. It's funding. You're saying.
Yeah, it's or sometimes they think like, why do we need a German studies department? Why
I
do we
see.
need an Italian studies department, right? This should be, it should be tuition in exchange for jobs, right, in the local community. But something's lost there too, right? I mean, yeah, sure, maybe you don't need a poetry department or a German studies department in rural, pick your rural state, Louisiana, right? We go to the Mississippi Delta in our episode where they're cutting the music program. Something's lost there, right? I mean, and that vacuum leads to resentment, where this idea that someone else has access to something that I don't have, right? Even if it's something that might not lead to a lucrative career, right? Like in poetry or music, but that idea that the urban schools have something and I don't, is leading to the backlash against higher ed and against institutions in our country.
I always feel as though I feel the college has become a talking point so much. That's why I ask you over and over how much of this is real, how much is not.
Yeah.
Because I just hear about, politicians running down elite East Coast universities. They talk about Harvard, and yet any of us, if we were told, hey, your kid's just gotten a full scholarship to Harvard, would go, that's just effing great, man.
Right.
Let me drive him to the airport or whatever it is. I mean, and we find many of these politicians who smear these elite universities as graduates of those elite universities. I mean, it's a weird talking point politically. So that's why I am particularly intrigued by what you're talking about, because I feel as though when you talk about, college and the rep that college has now, I just wonder if it's one more casualty of this political rhetoric that has become so filled with utter BS in this country.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're alluding to at least Stefanik, taking down a Harvard graduate, taking down the president of Harvard, right? A month after Claudine Gay testified, more than almost a year ago now, she resigned.
Yeah, that was a pressure campaign that was successful.
Right. Harvard's first Black president. Her tenure lasted, I think, 6 months and 2 days. The shortest tenure in history. October 7th is really a fascinating case study, because I think the violent attacks in Israel caught everyone by surprise, and they definitely caught college administrators by surprise. And a year ago, I don't think any of us could have predicted that there'd be all these campus protests over this issue, that, congressional hearings would feature Ivy League presidents who then, resign. This event and then the subsequent protests over the war in Gaza further divided these college campuses. And if you zoom in, though, Mark, and this is where I think we're doing something that no one else is doing, is we're pointing out that this really just divided the progressive culture on these campuses, where for the most part, there had been wide consensus, right? That split that we saw last fall provoked this political backlash on and off campus. And that there is some truth to this. For in one of the episodes, The Politics of Protest, we talked to the founders of Heterodox Academy, Jonathan Haidt. He's now known for his book about the anxious generation. He points out, when he was a professor at NYU, he went into an auditorium and he said, all Republicans raised their hands, and like a few hands went up. All libertarians raised their hands, a few hands went up. All Democrats raised their hands. Basically, everyone's hands went up. Right? There is on certain campuses there is a lack of viewpoint diversity, and that can lead to an echo chamber. And there's danger in that. But I do think that some of the attacks on higher ed is unfair. Right? At the same time, some of these schools have leaned into these social issues, perhaps too heavily in recent years. And now we're seeing that backlash. And now you're seeing schools like Harvard adopt this philosophy of institutional neutrality, saying, you know what, we're not going to weigh in on these issues, right? I talked to progressive professors who a year ago, you said, like, we never would have supported this. But after they saw what happened to Claudine Gay, they're saying, you know what, maybe she didn't need to issue 7 statements on the war 5,000 miles away in Gaza, rewriting certain statements. This is getting into the minutia, but
no, but it's interesting. I have a couple things just to finish up. One is just on that note. I thought one of the problems there was she was being overmanaged by lawyers and by others who were weighing in on it. I mean, it was clear that she wanted to say one thing, but she had to say another before that congressional committee, and I think that ultimately cost her the job and the reputation of the university.
Yeah, I mean, it was complicated. She was also facing plagiarism allegations at the time.
Right. Thank you for reminding me. I'd forgotten about that. Yeah. But the other thing I want to just double back that you said, which I thought was really intriguing, was, hey, everybody's hand can go up, as you say, in the the Republican Democrat poll in class. But what you were just hinting at, I think, is significant, which is that on the left in general, there was a lot of disagreement about October 7th. And I mean, and some of it was, really intense. And so I think increasingly there are going to be policy issues around a number of different things on the left. I mean, even women's reproductive rights. So you've got Gaza, women's reproductive rights, foreign policy, Ukraine. These are all things that all of a sudden the left has is multifaceted in terms of the way these discussions go down. And I'm wondering to what extent that's reflected.
Yeah, we have an episode about the polarization of the college presidency, where we feature the president of Colorado College, this young Harvard-educated civil rights attorney, and she wanted to speak out on these issues, and she felt constrained by the office. So when the Dobbs decision came down, she thought, you know what, I'm a civil rights attorney. I spent my whole career writing about these issues. Let me write a blog post about reproductive rights. And she alienated conservative voters on students on campus. And 3 years into the job, she resigned. And higher education lost a very promising leader because of the constraints of the job. These schools find themselves in a really tricky position. But I do think that this trend of institutional neutrality is taking off now, because schools are realizing, you know what, maybe if Claudine Gay hadn't said anything and their job is to host the debate over the war in Gaza, that maybe she wouldn't have gotten into this trouble in the first place. Of course, I mean, you go back, she was lured into saying something because Larry Summers, the former president, tweeted and said, I've never felt more, alienated from my own university. But yeah, I think these schools, they have, at least when I say these schools, we're talking about the highly selective schools, the Harvards, Yales, MITs, that people are now saying that maybe they did lean too heavily towards the social issues, and there's this return to focusing on the core mission of the university, which is academics and teaching the future leaders of this country to think for themselves and think independently.
The battles on campus around these conversations that were associated with sort of intellectual salons of one sort or another, now they've just all come to life. And now with new media, they've even risen to a profile that, we see. And now you can hear a real rundown of what's truly happening on campus. From what I understand, I can't wait to get into the podcast. There's as we've just said, a series of episodes all called College Uncovered. The podcasts are available now. Kirk Carapezza, I say it the Americanized way, sort of, and John Marcus are the hosts. And Kirk, it really sounds fascinating. I can't wait to get into it. And I really appreciate you spending a few moments with us. And just the last thing, the podcast, I take it, is available everywhere, yes?
Yeah, you can listen and learn, as they say, wherever you get your podcast. Check it out. We really try to boil it all down and let the listeners know what's really happening on college campuses.
Wish you the best. Really enjoyed our conversation. Come back and visit again, will you?
I will. Thanks, Mark.
Okay. College Uncovered. Kirk Carapezza. See you, bud. Bye-bye.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
Yeah. Right on. I am loving it. I really am. Seeing a lot of comments I need to respond to, and so I shall. There is no comment that I fear, Albert. You know that. There's no comment that I shy away from, Albert. There's no criticism, Albert, that I somehow shun.
Albert, thank you.
I welcome it, and I enjoy it. I bathe in it. I shower in it. Give me another descriptive word.
Roll in it.
Thank you. Roll in it. Very well done, Kim. Thank you.
Kim, how are you?
All right. Now, Albert, bring on the hate. Let me see what I've got. Still hope the Dodgers get their A's kicked in the World Series, but R.I.P. Fernando Valenzuela, 13 days until the election. How lovely, Jim. That is a lovely sentiment.
What?
I know that you probably wanted to say it here instead of the memorial service for Fernando. That would be an awkward thing to say there.
Probably the most hated teams, the two most hated teams in baseball playing against each other in the World Series.
Yeah, it's quite a...
feels like evil has prevailed.
It is true. The Yankees and the Dodgers, you feel like those are the handsomest quarterbacks in the school who are going after each other. You know what I mean? Just to use a different parallel. It's like the richest kids in school with the best cars, with the best dating experience, the best life experience. Somehow we're supposed to pick one to root for. It's sort of hard. There's a lot of the Israel stuff in here. I don't want to skip over it. I just don't want to get too deep into it because we just talked. These must have come in during the time we were speaking about it at the beginning of the show, and also with Brother Rothmann. I'll just read this one. That is merely a guess about Trump. Compare that to the administration Biden-Harris, who supported Israel more than any other American president. It's really a push for the Arabs. You're talking about the targeted marketing to Arabs against Harris and Walz because of their support for Israel. We talked about the different ways in which it's being marketed to, particularly the Arab community in Michigan. And Michigan has a large Arab community and a Muslim community, as well as occupying a critical swing state. Yeah, but the idea somehow that they're going to go for Jill Stein or they're going to leave top of ticket blank, that is a vote for Trump, and that really is cutting their own throat. I don't know why they would want to do it. I mean, as I said to you before, and I've made this point at the beginning of the show, and I'll make it repeatedly anytime you have any questions about it, I'd be happy to get into it on some level. But the Democrats at least will take a meeting on modifying policy toward Israel.
Yeah.
Harris and Walz will take a meeting on these things. They will not only pay lip service, but I think already you're seeing, I mentioned this at the beginning of the show, Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, demanding from Netanyahu that there be some Israeli effort to provide humanitarian assistance to areas of Gaza. You will not get that conversation from a Trump administration. You just won't. So no one has control over Netanyahu, says Rain. Arab Americans are targeting Biden and Harris, which is a big mistake. Yeah, I think. Religion poisons everything, says Nullifidian. I wish I could disagree with that. I cannot. Trump and Netanyahu are brothers from another mother. Trump will be so much worse for Gaza and American Muslims than Harris. Arab and Muslim Americans need to think deeper about this, says teacher Lori. A lot of the world would be different today if Nader had not sucked away the Gore votes and Bush had not been in power, says John Watson. Hear, that is so very true. You would have had no war in Iraq. You would have had this country out in front on clean energy. You, I think, would have had the competence of Al Gore. You know, what you had in George Bush was a kind of dim leader. The young Bush was dim, okay? Wasn't that bright. And he had a basically an administration run by Dick Cheney in large measure. That's why one of the reasons I hate Dick Cheney so much. I think he got us into a lot of that. The world, as John says, would have been a much different place had indeed there not been a third party to siphon off some of those votes, and it would have been clearer. Although, as noted, Gore did win that election. Phineas says, how can any minority vote for Trump? Oh, the insanity. You know, it is an insane time for sure. Noe Marie says, drinking game, here you go. Take a shot every time Mark says diarrhea.
You did say that a lot today.
I did. We were talking about the E. coli breakout at McDonald's, and I didn't realize apparently I was saying it a lot. So, but you're drinking Coachella Valley coffee. So that is the magic of that drinking game. Yes, an all-knowing God would pick a cheat, liar, and thief to lead his people, says Ron. I think that appointment may have come from somewhere deeper and hotter. I think that was the,
This is a word from the Lord, and he's not happy.
That's what I was hearing, I will pass on the McSquirts. Thank you very much. Wow. Who said that? That's funny. Jose? Very, very funny. Noe Marie says, by the way, I like Coachella Valley coffee. I'm just not trying to get everybody drunk first thing in the morning. Yeah, that was because I was talking about the diarrhea all the time. Here is a super chat from No Contendo, who loves the super chats, and we love No Contendo into the mix. It is interesting how 45 can't get any upstanding, honest, and educated black men to stand beside him, but instead surrounds himself with Antonio Brown and, Byron, who's the congressperson. And also, did you see, Kamish, who else is out there in front for 45 for Trump? There's another very high-profile football player. Did you see who it is?
Ooh, I didn't. I'm not sure.
It's Le'Veon Bell. Can you imagine? I mean, he was the great running back for the Steelers, and he is now at Trump rallies. So, yeah, I don't get it either, but again, I don't get
People
a lot.
Remember him for sitting out a whole season. You know, usually players hold out for a new contract. He sat out one whole year for a new contract. So,
yeah. So now he's on tour with Donald Trump.
It's basically all the former Pittsburgh Steelers with Antonio Brown and him campaigning for Trump. So.
Exactly right. The commissioner's right. Tony says Trump can't name which Bible or even a verse in the Bible, but he's about Christians. The con is strong in some. Yeah, ain't it true? Thought we had that Christians thing. Didn't he say, where are my Christians? I am a Christian, something like that.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Isn't he saying, and maybe this is the one that has the Christians, is that it? I don't know.
My beautiful Christians, I love you, Christians.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, he loves his Christians. Arrest Merrick Garland, says Ichabod Deer. Arrest Merrick Garland for negligence of duty. I prefer dereliction of duty just because the both D's, it's alliterative, dereliction of duty, get it, D-D. But I agree, Ichabod. If you want Merrick Garland hate, if you want someone who loathes Merrick Garland, who is disgusted by how Merrick Garland didn't even want the appearance of anything political, it was hands off, didn't even bring his Justice Department to charge Trump or even to investigate Trump until after that J6 committee, you're talking to the guy. I hate Merrick Garland, if I can use, and when I say hate Merrick Garland, the man is fine. I'm not, but he has no place in the Justice Department. And
Here's a question though about Merrick Garland.
He slow-walked everything.
He was up for a Supreme Court nomination.
That's
and
correct.
Was blocked. So would you have liked him better, do you think, in that position as a Supreme Court justice? Because now that he's been the Attorney General and has kind of dragged his heels on prosecuting Trump, your opinion is negative. Would it still be negative in any job or just this job?
This is a really good point. I mean, the implied point, which is that, how would he have been as a Supreme Court justice? One of the reasons he was chosen as a Supreme Court nominee for a justiceship is because he is sort of this middle-of-the-road mainstreamer. So he wasn't viewed as, if you want to look at it this way, as a lefty. Obama appointment, and yet he wasn't viewed as a lefty. He was viewed as someone who the right could vote for and who would pass some of the right's litmus tests, okay? So in Merrick Garland, you have the virtue of being a balanced justice. Perhaps he would have been better suited for a seat on the SCOTUS bench. I just feel as though when it comes to pursuing justice in a different role as Attorney General, he's proven that he just isn't up for the job. I mean, we're talking about the survival of America, really, on some level. I mean, if Trump really gets in with his Project 2025 henchmen to do the work, it's all over. Tomorrow, so the answer to your question is I would have rather had him on the Supreme Court. He might have surprised me there, too, and been bad. But I think he would have been even-handed. But I think he bent over backwards to seem even-handed by letting criminal activity that was undermining the republic go completely unanswered. So that's where I am on Merrick Garland.
So would you say that then it's the fault of Merrick Garland if Trump gets back into the White House? That if Merrick Garland had tried to prosecute earlier, had tried to get these cases going earlier, Trump could be at the point where his ability to run again would be done?
No, yes, of course that's true, but the real original sin was the GOP. They could have easily impeached him and removed him. They could have easily. I mean, he engineered a coup. You're telling me you can't get enough votes to prevent him from ever being president again? That's the GOP of 2023, 2024. It's outrageous. I mean, and actually prior to 2023, come to think of it. But all I'm trying to say is maybe that was the original sin. You guys had multiple chances to remove this guy from office. You knew that he was engineering this coup, and he did engineer it. And still, he got a pass, and that's where we are. I don't think it's up to the Justice Department and prosecution necessarily to clean up the mess. We are where we are because of a lot of things. We've talked about some of those variables that went into the Trump popularity. But when it comes to the survival of Trump, it's Mitch McConnell and the Senate. That's really where Trump was given the pass. So running out of time, Albert. I don't know what more I can. Super sticker from Wes. Yay. Thank you, Wes. Such a great supporter of the show. And a big shout out to Wes. Thanks to everybody who is a super sticker and super chatter. Yeah, there was somebody mentioned that they wanted hate equals envy. You wish Mookie. Oh, this is about the about the Dodgers. Mookie, Freddie, and Shohei were on your team. Go Dodgers! Win for El Toro 34. Beat New York, says Luis. With a $5 super chat, it goes down rough for the commissioner. You know, he is a Giants fan. He cannot root for...
It's hard to be envious with our, I'd take 2010, 2012, and 2014 World Series championships.
Those are the Giants. The Giants winning there. Yeah. Right.
And good luck to your team. Very good.
But Luis, we love you. We love all our Southern Californians. So, and you're a great supporter of the show. So, disagree, Kim. It's the fault of 50% of the country for electing a 34-time felon megalomaniac sociopath, says Luis. I was going to say that too, except so the this is a really interesting question, and I won't get into it in a big way now, but when Kim was first saying, well, do you blame Merrick Garland or do you blame the Justice Department? I thought, well, I blame the American voter on one level because, but you can also blame the media for giving Donald Trump a pass in 2015 and the run-up to the election in 2016, the covering of an empty podium when he was anticipated to be speaking over what was really happening with Bernie Sanders rallies and the like. There was a lot going on in the body politic back then when Trump was first ascending to power. I call out the media again for not telling the story, the real story of Donald Trump as a failed businessman and an utterly know-nothing leader who didn't even run his business as well. Those stories just weren't told in the run-up to 2016. They weren't told in a high-profile way. I read a long New Yorker article on it during that time, and I thought, well, I just don't think many people are reading the New Yorker, you know what I mean, or reading this article, and it wasn't picked up by mainstream media. So I think there are a lot of fingerprints on the Trump rise to power in 2016, and a lot of those same elements are still around now. I think Trump is a very tough thing to manage because he speaks continuously in falsehoods. He just makes stuff up. And it's tough when you're getting this fire hose of lies to call it all out. And then you could say this, what Randy's saying. I think, is it Randy? I thought I just glanced at it. I mean, he blames Hillary and the Democrats infighting with the Sanders people, 10 to 12% of whom voted for Trump. That's interesting to me. I don't know if that number's right, but I'm going to take it that it is. If so, it's a little like the Arab Americans who are voting for Jill Stein. I don't get it. Seriously? You're voting for Trump as a protest vote against Hillary, knowing that Trump is going to appoint a conservative justice to the open seat on SCOTUS. To me, all you needed to do in the first election of Trump was look at the Supreme Court. Just look at it. You got an open seat. Who do you want to fill that seat? You want someone who leans liberal or someone who leans toward activist, radical, alt-right conservatism? It's insanity that you could be a Bernie Sanders supporter and just because you felt that he was mistreated, and he was, they stole that nomination with the way that the Democratic Party is set up, the superdelegates and the ways in which they forced Bernie Sanders to essentially sit on the sidelines. And Hillary Clinton didn't go to Wisconsin, and you can go to all of these different things.
Sure.
But at the end of it all, I don't see how you don't vote for Hillary, given the fact that you have an open SCOTUS seat. I mean, even if you didn't have the SCOTUS seat, again, I can't. But now we have wrought this. And so...
there's a saying that America gets the America it deserves. But I don't think we deserve what would be coming if he wins.
Well, John Rothmann always says, I believe in the American people, I believe in the American people, I believe in the American people. And you know where I am. I don't believe in the American people, I don't believe in the American people, and I don't believe in the American people. So, there you go. I mean, I call it straight, man. I'm not going to sit here and go, well, I believe in the American people, and they'll always make the right decision if they're given the right... Bullshit. Okay? It's just bullshit. Don't count on people. They'll let you down.
What the hell is going on in the United States of America?
You. Ron Owens gets it. You understand.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Right on, everybody. I love it. I'm going to go to my street corner, and I'm going to start ranting and raving right now.
That's why are you yelling?
Now I recognize you. Okay.
That is where I'm going. I continue this show to a much smaller audience. It's passing vehicles, and I yell various policy positions at them.
Why are you yelling?
So, let's meet here tomorrow. Tomorrow, who's on the show, Kim? Tell everybody.
Tomorrow we have Politics Girl on the show.
Yes, Politics
That will be
Girl.
in the first hour. Then former federal prosecutor David Katz will be on the show.
And David Katz will talk about Judge Cannon for Attorney General under a Trump administration and the legality of Musk giving away $1 million to swing state petition signers. So we'll do all of that tomorrow.
I'm Shadow Stevens for The Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
What a day it's going to be tomorrow. Please be here.
Bye-bye.
Go over to Kim for the after party live. Until tomorrow, everyone. Bye.